The sun had barely cleared the eastern ridge when Ethan Cord knew he was going to die. Three riders circled him like vultures, their horses kicking up dust that turned the morning air into a choking haze. His shoulder burned where the first bullet had grazed him, blood soaking through his shirt in a dark stain that spread with each labored breath. The Winchester lay 10 feet away in the dirt, knocked from his grip when his horse had bolted. His Colt was empty, the cylinder clicking uselessly as he squeezed the trigger one last time. The rustlers had come at dawn, cutting through his fence line with practiced efficiency. 12 horses, his entire breeding stock. 4 years of work, every dollar he had, every hope for a future that didn't taste like ash and regret. They had expected an easy score from a lone rancher living at the edge of nowhere. They hadn't expected him to fight. Now they were going to make him pay for that mistake. The leader, a man with a scar that split his left eyebrow, spurred his horse closer. His pistol hung loose in his hand, almost casual. Behind him, the other two rustlers spread out, cutting off any chance of escape. The rocky outcropping where Ethan had taken cover offered protection from bullets, but none from patience. They had time. He didn't. Ethan's vision blurred at the edges. Blood loss or fear, he couldn't tell. His fingers scrabbled in the dust for a rock, a stick, anything. The scar-faced man laughed, a sound like stones grinding together. "Should have just let us take the horses, his friend." Ethan tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. He'd seen men die before, in the war, at the fort. Always thought when his time came, it would be quick, clean. Not like this, bleeding out in the dirt while 3 men watched him fade. The rustler raised his pistol. The crack of a rifle split the morning silence. The scar-faced man jerked sideways in his saddle, a red bloom spreading across his chest. He toppled from his horse, hitting the ground with a sound that seemed too soft for a man's death. His horse screamed and bolted. The other 2 rustlers wheeled their mounts, searching for the shooter. Another shot. The second rustler grabbed his arm, cursing, his pistol falling from nerveless fingers. The third man didn't wait. He kicked his horse hard and ran, disappearing into the maze of red rock and scrub brush that bordered Ethan's property. The wounded rustler followed, clutching his bleeding arm, leaving their dead companion in the dust. Ethan pressed his back against the rock, his heart hammering so hard he thought his ribs might crack. His eyes swept the landscape, searching for his savior. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then movement, high on the ridge to his right, a figure on horseback, silhouetted against the rising sun. The rider descended slowly, picking a careful path down the rocky slope. As they drew closer, details emerged from the glare. Not a he, a she. Patchy by the way she sat the horse, by the beaded decoration on the rifle sling, by the long black hair that hung past her shoulders. She rode with the confidence of someone who had grown up on horseback, who knew this land in ways Ethan never would. But something was wrong. Her movements were too stiff, too controlled. As she came within 30 yards, Ethan saw the darker stains on her buckskin dress. Blood, fresh and old, layered like terrible history. The woman swayed in the saddle. Ethan pushed himself upright, his wounded shoulders screaming protest. He staggered forward 3 steps before his legs gave out. He went down hard on his knees, catching himself on his good arm. The woman slid from her horse. She didn't fall. She descended in stages, one hand gripping the saddle, lowering herself with the kind of careful deliberation that spoke of someone who knew exactly how much pain they could endure before consciousness left them. Her feet touched the ground. She took 1 step. 2. Then she folded, her knees buckling, her body crumpling like a puppet with cut strings. Ethan crawled to her. Up close, the blood was worse than he'd thought. Her dress was soaked from the waist down, and when he touched her shoulder to turn her over, his hand came away red. But it was what she held that stopped his breath. A bundle of cloth, clutched against her chest with desperate strength, even in unconsciousness. Small, too small. Ethan's hands moved on instinct, the same instinct that had made him a decent field medic during his brief time in uniform. He pulled the cloth aside. The baby girl couldn't have been more than 2 days old. Her skin had the waxy pallor of death, her tiny lips blue. She had been dead for hours, maybe longer, but her mother had wrapped her carefully, had held her close, had carried her through whatever hell had brought them to this moment. Ethan sat back on his heels, his wounded shoulder forgotten. He had seen death before, children's death, still bore the scars of it, visible and otherwise. But this, a mother fleeing with her dead child, refusing to let go even as her own life bled away, this cut deeper than any bullet. The woman's eyes fluttered open. They were dark brown, almost black, and filled with such pain that Ethan had to look away. She focused on him slowly, her gaze traveling from his face to his blood-stained shirt to the gun belt at his waist. Recognition flickered in those eyes, not of him specifically, but of what he represented. White, male, armed. Her hand moved with surprising speed, pulling a knife from her belt. The blade was small but sharp, glinting in the morning sun as she raised it between them. Ethan lifted his good hand, palm out. Easy. You just saved my life. The words seemed to surprise her. The knife wavered but didn't lower. When she spoke, her voice was rough, strained with pain and thirst and something darker. Then we are even. Each word cost her. Now leave me to die. Her English was perfect, barely accented. Mission school, Ethan guessed. He'd seen enough Apache children herded into those places, seen what came back, if they came back. Can't do that. He kept his voice level, the way he'd talk to a spooked horse. You're bleeding bad. Let me help. No help. She tried to push herself up, failed, her strength spent on the effort of holding the knife. No white man's help. Her eyes moved to the bundle still clutched in her other arm. Something broke in her expression, a cracking that went all the way down to whatever foundation she'd built to keep standing. Tears didn't fall. Ethan suspected she had none left to shed. Your daughter, he said it gently. I can bury her properly. The knife clattered to the ground. The woman's hand moved to cover the small face, a gesture so tender it hurt to witness. You know nothing of properly. I know some. Ethan shifted his weight, trying to ease the burning in his shoulder. I know she should face east. I know there should be things for her journey. A blanket, water, maybe a toy, if she had one. The woman stared at him, really looked at him for the first time, seeing past the white skin and the gun belt to whatever lay beneath. How you know this? Ethan's throat tightened. The old guilt, never far from the surface, rose like bile. I learned from the woman my brother killed. The words hung in the air between them. The woman's eyes widened, her whole body going rigid. Then slowly, impossibly slowly, she reached out with her free hand. Her fingers, trembling with weakness, touched the back of his right hand where it rested on his knee. There. The scar, 4 parallel lines faded white against his weathered skin. They curved from the base of his thumb across the back of his hand, ending just below his knuckles. A bear's claw from a fight when he was 19 and stupid enough to think he could trap the damn thing alone. The woman traced those scars with her fingertip. You, she whispered, you bury my mother. 4 winters ago. Ethan's blood turned to ice. He remembered. God help him. He remembered that day with a clarity that made his nightmares seem merciful. Fort Whipple. His brother Daniel, drunk on patrol whiskey and the kind of rage that comes from fear poorly hidden. The Apache camp, peaceful. Just families trading with the fort. The officer who mistook movement for attack. The chaos that followed. And the woman. Middle-aged, trying to shield 3 children with her own body. Daniel's rifle firing wild. The woman falling. Ethan running to her, already knowing it was too late but unable to stop himself. Her blood on his hands. Her last words in English he hadn't expected her to know. Tell my daughter, Naylan, tell her I died without pain. Ethan had lied to the dying woman, promised he would find her daughter, knowing he never would. Then he had buried her himself the way he'd seen Apache bury their dead during the brief peace before the wars. Facing east, with her beadwork and a water skin and a lock of hair from each of the children she'd saved. Daniel had died 2 weeks later, ambushed on patrol. Ethan had left the army the same day, bought this land, built this ranch, tried to build a wall high enough to keep out the memories. The wall had just crumbled. Nalin, he said her name like a prayer or a curse. Your mother's last words were about you. The woman who had saved his life closed her eyes. A single tear traced down her cheek, cutting a clean line through the dust and dried blood. My mother died hating white men. Now her daughter is saved by one. The spirits mock me. Ethan wanted to tell her the spirits had nothing to do with it. That this was just the random cruelty of a world that took and sometimes rarely gave back in ways that felt more like punishment than grace. But the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he said, let me get you to the house. You need water, bandages, then we'll see to your daughter. Nalin opened her eyes. They were dry now, hard as river stones. Why you help me? I am Apache. You hate my people. I don't hate anybody. It was the truth, mostly. And you saved my life. That means something. She studied him for a long moment, weighing, judging, coming to some decision he couldn't read. Help me stand. Ethan got his good arm under her shoulders, feeling the sticky warmth of her blood soaking through both their clothes. She was lighter than he expected, bird-boned despite the strength that had let her ride and shoot and survive whatever had brought her here. They made it 3 steps before she sagged against him, her legs giving out. I got you. He adjusted his grip, taking more of her weight. House is a quarter mile. Can you make it? I make it. Her jaw set with determination that would have been admirable if it wasn't so clearly rooted in desperation. My daughter comes with me. Of course. They moved slowly, Ethan supporting Nayland while she clutched her dead child. Behind them, the rustler's body lay where it had fallen. Ethan would have to deal with that later, report it to the sheriff. Hope Marcus Holland would see it for what it was, self-defense. Even if the person doing the defending wore Apache beadwork and spoke with an accent that made certain men reach for their guns. The morning sun climbed higher, beating down on them with the particular cruelty of desert heat. Sweat mixed with blood on Ethan's back. Nayland's breathing grew more labored with each step. Twice she stumbled. Twice he kept her upright. The third time, he simply lifted her, cradling her and her daughter both, his wounded shoulder screaming its protest. Put me down, Nayland said, but there was no strength behind the words. Almost there. His ranch house came into view, a modest structure of adobe and timber that he'd built himself over 3 years. It wasn't much. 2 rooms, a covered porch, a well that gave clean water most days. But it was his, bought with money he'd saved from his army pay and his time as a blacksmith at the fort. Free and clear. No debts, no ties to the past except the ones he carried in his head. He kicked the door open and brought Nayland inside, laying her on his bed with a gentleness that surprised him. She didn't let go of her daughter. Her fingers, white-knuckled, gripped the small bundle as if releasing it might mean acknowledging a truth she wasn't ready to face. Ethan lit a lantern, bringing warm light to the dim room. He pulled supplies from a trunk at the foot of the bed. Clean cloth, needle and thread, a bottle of whiskey that he mostly didn't touch anymore. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, the muscle memory of tending wounded soldiers in field hospitals where screaming was the only music and prayer, the only medicine that seemed to work. I need to see where you're bleeding. He kept his voice neutral. I'll be respectful. Nayland's eyes found his, searching for the lie. I am finding something that seemed to satisfy her because she nodded just barely. The wound was in her stitch just below her ribs. A knife, not a bullet. Deep but clean. Someone had meant to kill her but had been interrupted or unlucky. The blood loss was serious but not immediately fatal if he could stop the bleeding. He worked quickly, cleaning the wound with whiskey that made Nayland's breath hiss between her teeth, but drew no other sound of pain. This will hurt. He threaded the needle. Everything hurts. She said it without self-pity. Simple fact. He stitched the wound closed with neat, tight passes. Nayland watched the ceiling, her face carved from stone, her daughter still clutched to her chest. When he finished and wrapped her midsection in clean bandages, she finally looked at him again. Thank you. 2 words. They shouldn't have carried the weight they did. Ethan cleaned his hands in the wash basin, the water turning pink. You need rest. Food when you can stomach it. Water definitely. My daughter needs burial. I know. He dried his hands on a cloth that had seen better days. Tell me what she needs. I'll do it right. For the first time since he'd found her, something other than pain flickered across Nayland's face. Surprise, maybe, or the ghost of it. You would do this? For Apache child? For any child. The old wound in his chest, the one that never quite healed, throbbed. For your child. Nayland was quiet for a long moment. Outside, birds called to each other in the cottonwoods by the creek. Normal sounds. Life continuing while death waited patiently in the room. She needs to face the rising sun, Nayland said finally, with her feet pointing west, so her spirit knows the way home. Water for the journey. Something to hold, so she is not alone. I have a doll. The words came out before Ethan could stop them. It was going to be for... He couldn't finish. It's carved wood. A horse, small enough for small hands. Understanding passed between them, wordless and complete. They had both lost children. They both carried that particular kind of death that never left you, that colored every sunrise and turned every night into a battlefield against memory. That would be good, Nayland whispered. Ethan found the little horse in the trunk where he'd kept it for 4 years, unable to throw it away, unable to look at it. He'd carved it during the long nights when his wife was pregnant, when the future seemed bright enough to believe in. The baby had died with its mothers, their bodies buried together in the small cemetery behind the church in Red Bluff. He wrapped the horse in clean cloth and brought it to Nayland. She took it with trembling fingers, placed it carefully in her daughter's tiny hands, adjusting the grip as if the child might drop it. Then, with aching slowness, she kissed her daughter's forehead. "Goodbye, little one. Your grandmother waits for you in the stars." Ethan had to look away. An hour later, as the sun reached its zenith, they stood together at the edge of Ethan's property, where the land dropped away into a small valley. He had dug the grave himself, his wounded shoulder protesting every shovelful, but the physical pain was almost welcome, a distraction from the other kind. Nolan had insisted on walking, leaning heavily on a stick Ethan had found for her. She wore one of his shirts over her torn and blood-stained dress, the fabric hanging loose on her small frame. Her face was gray with exhaustion and blood loss, but her back was straight, proud, unbroken by everything that had tried to break her. The grave was small, too small. Ethan had lined it with smooth river stones and soft grass. He had oriented it precisely east to west, using the sun's position to be sure. Now he waited while Nolan said goodbye in words he didn't understand, a language that sounded like wind through canyon walls and water over stone. When she finished, she looked at him. "You have words to say?" Ethan hadn't prayed in years. Wasn't sure he believed in a God that would let things like this happen, but he closed his eyes and tried. "Lord, if you're listening, take care of this little one. She didn't get a chance at life, but maybe wherever she's going is better than here. Watch over her. Keep her safe. Let her know her mother loved her enough to carry her through hell itself." His voice broke on the last word. He opened his eyes to find Nolan staring at him with an expression he couldn't read. "You believe in same God as mission school teachers?" "Don't know what I believe anymore." Honesty seemed important, but I figured it couldn't hurt to ask. They buried the child together, Nolan placing her gently in the grave, Ethan covering her with earth so carefully it might have been silk. When it was done, Nolan stood for a long time looking at the small mound of dirt. Then she swayed, her strength finally spent. Ethan caught her before she fell. "I got you," he said again. This time she didn't argue. He carried her back to the house, laid her in his bed, and pulled a blanket over her shaking form. She was asleep before he left the room, or unconscious, he couldn't tell. Either way, her face and rest looked younger than he'd thought. Mid-20s maybe, too young for the kind of pain that lined her features even in sleep. Ethan sat on his porch as afternoon shadows stretched long across his land. His shoulder throbbed in time with his heartbeat. The dead rustler still needed dealing with. The sheriff would need to be informed. A dozen practical concerns pressed on him, but he couldn't seem to move. A woman who had saved his life now slept in his bed. An Apache woman who carried a dead child through the desert. A woman whose mother he had buried, whose name had been a dying woman's last words. The coincidence was too perfect, too cruel to be anything but fate or punishment or some combination of both. Tomorrow he would have to figure out what to do. How to keep her safe when the mere fact of her existence here would make him a target. How to explain to men like Sheriff Marcus Holland why he'd taken in an Apache woman when the territory was still raw from conflicts that had no winners, only survivors and ghosts. But tonight he just sat and watched the sunset, painting the desert in shades of orange and red and purple, colors like blood and bruises and the kind of beauty that only came from pain. Inside the house, Nolan stirred. He heard her cry out, a sound of pure anguish that cut through the evening quiet. He was on his feet and through the door before he could think about it. She was sitting up in bed, her hands clutching the blanket, her eyes wide and unseeing. Nightmare. He'd had enough of those to recognize the signs. "You're safe," he said from the doorway. "You're in my house. You're safe." Nolan's eyes focused on him slowly. For a moment he saw fear there, raw and honest. Then it shuddered away, replaced by that stony mask she wore so well. "My daughter. Buried, proper, like you asked." She nodded once, her hands slowly relaxed their death grip on the blanket. "I remember now, the grave, the stones." Ethan leaned against the doorframe, suddenly exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with his wounded shoulder. "You should rest more. You lost a lot of blood." "Cannot rest." But even as she said it, her eyes were closing again. "Not safe. Safe enough for now." He moved to the chair beside the bed, settling into it despite the protest from his shoulder. "I'll keep watch." Her eyes opened a fraction. "Why?" It was the same question she'd asked before, but this time it carried a different weight, not suspicion. Something closer to genuine curiosity, or maybe just bone-deep weariness that needed an answer to hold on to. "Because you saved my life," he said. "Because I owed your mother a debt I could never repay. Because—" He paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound hollow. "Because everybody deserves a safe place to grieve." Nolan looked at him for a long moment, Then her eyes closed again, and this time when she drifted off, something in her face had softened. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the possibility of it. Ethan sat in the gathering darkness, listening to her breathe. Outside, coyotes began their evening song, wild and mournful. The night pressed in, full of questions he had no answers for, and consequences he couldn't yet imagine. But for this moment, in this room, a woman who had every reason to hate him slept peacefully. And somehow, despite everything, that felt like the beginning of something. Whether that something was redemption or ruin, only time would tell. The first week passed in a silence that felt almost comfortable. Nayland recovered with the stubborn determination of someone who had survived worse. She refused Ethan's bed after that first night, choosing instead to sleep in the barn loft where she could see the door and the surrounding land. She refused his offers of food, then accepted them without thanks, eating in quick, efficient bites like someone who had learned not to waste time on pleasure. She didn't speak unless spoken to, and even then her answers came in single words or gestures. But she worked. God, did she work. Despite the wound in her side that had to hurt like hell, she mended fences, fed the horses, hauled water from the well. She moved through Ethan's ranch like a ghost, present but not quite there, her eyes always scanning the horizon for threats he couldn't see. Ethan gave her space. He'd been alone long enough to understand the value of silence, the need to process grief in your own time and your own way. But he watched her, couldn't help it, and what he saw troubled him. She was waiting. For what, he didn't know. Death, maybe, or whatever had driven her to his land in the first place to come finish the job. On the third day, she found the locked room. Ethan came back from checking the fence line to find her standing outside the small door at the back of the house. Her hand rested on the wooden frame, her head tilted as if listening to something inside. "That door stays closed," he said, his voice coming out harsher than he intended. Nellen pulled her hand back like she'd been burned. "I not mean to intrude." "You weren't. You didn't." He took a breath, forced his tone to soften. "It's just that room it's not for anyone." She looked at him, really looked, and he saw understanding dawn in her dark eyes. "Your child." Not a question, a statement of fact delivered with the certainty of someone who recognized grief's architecture. My child, my wife, everything that was going to be. Nalin nodded slowly. "I understand. I have such places too, in my heart, where no one else allowed." They stood there for a moment, two people bound by losses they couldn't share and couldn't escape. Then Nayland turned and walked away, her bare feet silent on the hard-packed earth. That night, Ethan found her sitting outside the barn, staring at the stars. He brought 2 cups of coffee, offered one. She took it, surprising him. "You not have to sleep in barn," he said. "House has 2 rooms. You could have one." "Barn is better. I see who comes." "You expecting someone?" She sipped the coffee, wincing at the heat. "Always expecting. Waiting is Apache way now. Wait for soldiers. Wait for sickness. Wait for next promise to be broken." The bitterness in her voice cut deep. "What happened to you?" He kept his voice gentle. "Before you came here, I mean, the wound, your daughter." For a long time he thought she wouldn't answer. Then she set down the coffee cup and began to speak, her words coming slow at first, then faster, like a dam breaking. "I was married to Kaya, son of chief. It was arranged to bring peace between clans. He was kind at first, treated me well." She paused, gathering strength or courage. "But his family, they want son, need son. When I pregnant, they make offerings to spirits, prayers for boy child. When my daughter born," her voice cracked just slightly, "when she born, they say I cursed. That mission school poisoned my womb, made me weak." Ethan's hands clenched into fists. He could see where this was going and already felt sick. Kaya's mother, Elu, she lost 3 sons to white man's bullets. 3 boys she raised, all dead before they 20 summers. She look at my daughter and see only weakness. Only another girl who will grow up to bury sons. Nellen's eyes were dry, but her voice carried the weight of tears she refused to shed. "Third night after birth, I wake up. Something wrong, I know it. Feel it in my bones. I go to daughter's cradle." She stopped, swallowed hard. She not breathing, and Elu standing there, hand still on baby's throat. The words hung in the air like smoke. "I try to kill Elu, try to make her pay, but Kaya stopped me. He say I'm mad with grief, seeing things not real. He believe his mother, not his wife. And Elu, she's smart. She put baby's blood on my hands while I sleeping. Make it look like I the one who killed my daughter." Oh, understanding crashed over Ethan like a cold wave. They blamed you. Worse. They make me ghost. Woman who kill her own child is worst kind of spirit. No longer person. No longer part of clan. They give me small knife, little water, turn me out. Her jaw set. I take my daughter's body. Could not leave her there. I walk for 2 days looking for place to bury her away from that evil place. Then you saw me fighting. Yes, I think, if I save white man, maybe I worth something again. Maybe I not just murderer and ghost. She looked at him directly. Then I see who you are. See scar on your hand. Remember stories my mother tell about white soldier who bury her proper. And I know spirits laughing at me. Ethan wanted to say something comforting, something wise. But what comfort existed for a woman who had lost everything? What wisdom could he offer when his own life was built on avoiding the past rather than confronting it? I'm sorry, he said finally, for what my brother did, for what your husband's family did, for all of it. Nellen shook her head. You not responsible for your brother's bullets, just like I not responsible for my daughter's death, even though everyone say I am. She stood, picking up her coffee cup. But sorry is just word, Ethan Cord. Changes nothing. Brings back no one. She walked into the barn, leaving him alone with the stars and the crushing weight of truths he couldn't fix. The 5th day brought Sheriff Marcus Holland. Ethan was breaking a new mare in the corral when he saw the dust cloud approaching from the east. One rider, moving at an easy pace. He recognized Marcus's bay gelding long before he could make out the man himself. Marcus Holland was a big man, broad in the shoulders and thick in the middle, with a gray beard that he kept neatly trimmed despite living in country that didn't much care about appearances. He'd been sheriff of Red Bluff for 6 years, ever since the town had grown large enough to need one. Before that, he'd been cavalry, same as Ethan's brother, same as Ethan himself for that brief, terrible time. Ethan, Marcus dismounted with the careful deliberation of a man whose back had seen better days. Heard you had some trouble with rustlers. News travels fast. Does when there's a dead body involved. Marcus's eyes swept the ranch, taking in details most men would miss. Found Billy Crenshaw 3 miles from here, shot through the chest. His partner said an Apache did it. Ethan's blood ran cold, but he kept his face neutral. That's so? That's so. Marcus pulled off his hat, wiped sweat from his forehead. They also said you were there, said someone on the ridge shot Billy while they were trying to rob you. They tell you they were robbing me? Didn't have to. Found your horses in their camp. Marcus's expression didn't change. I'm not here about the rustlers, Ethan. Self-defense is clear enough. I'm here about the shooter. Behind them in the barn, Ethan heard the faint sound of movement. Nellen listening. He had to play this careful. I didn't see who shot them. Not exactly a lie. Someone on the ridge, like they said. Could have been Apache. Could have been anyone. Marcus studied him for a long moment. Ethan, we've known each other a long time, served together, more or less. I know you're not a liar by nature. But there's footprints all around your place. Small ones. Barefoot. Woman's prints, I'd reckon. Marcus's voice dropped lower. And there's word from the Apache reservation. Missing woman. Pregnant, they said. Though that might have been wrong. Fled from her husband after some kind of trouble. Lots of Apache women out there, Marcus. Not many with reason to be this far south. Not many with $300 on their heads. The number hit Ethan like a fist. $300 was more than most men made in 2 years. Enough to turn good people into hunters and hunters into killers. Husband's offering the bounty, Marcus continued. Says she's dangerous. Says she killed their newborn child and ran. He paused, watching Ethan's face. Says anyone harboring her is guilty of aiding a murderer. Ethan forced himself to breathe normally. If I see anyone like that, I'll be sure to let you know. Marcus put his hat back on, settled it carefully. You remember Fort Bowie, 77? The change in subject threw Ethan. What about it? You remember when I got caught outside the wire after curfew, drunk, trying to sneak back in? Marcus's eyes were level, honest. You told the colonel I was with you, running inventory in the armory. He believed you. If he hadn't, I'd have been court-martialed. Maybe hanged for desertion. You weren't deserting, you were just drunk and stupid. Doesn't matter what I was. Matters what they would have called it. Marcus gathered his reins. I owed you my life that day, Ethan, still do. Hope flickered in Ethan's chest. Then, but I'm sheriff now. Got a town to protect. Got laws to uphold, even the ones I don't much like. Marcus swung into the saddle. So here's what I'm telling you, friend to friend. If there was an Apache woman here, and if she's not dangerous like they say, she's got maybe 2 weeks before I have to come back, before the bounty hunters come, before this whole thing gets out of my control. And if I don't have any idea what you're talking about, Marcus's smile was sad. Then I'd say you got 2 weeks to keep not knowing. After that, I got to do my job, and that means I got to make a choice I don't want to make. He turned his horse toward town, then stopped. One more thing. Legal wife can't be taken without a trial. State law, federal law too, since the territory ain't officially organized yet. Just something to think about. He rode away, leaving Ethan standing in the dust, his mind racing. Nayland emerged from the barn, her face pale. She'd heard every word. You should tell him where I am. Her voice was steady. Get the bounty. $300 is much money for rancher. I don't want their money. Then you are a fool. But there was no heat in her words. They will come, Ethan Cord. My husband, his warriors, the bounty hunters Marcus speak of. They will come and you will die trying to protect me. Maybe. Not maybe, certain. She moved closer, her dark eyes searching his face. Why you do this? I am nothing to you. Just ghost Apache woman. Ethan thought about the question. Really thought about it. My wife died 4 years ago, he said finally. Baby died with her. I built this ranch to get away from people who looked at me like I was broken, like I was something to pity. You don't look at me that way. How I look at you. Like I'm just a man, not a tragedy, not a symbol, just someone who buried your mother and your daughter and knows what it means to lose everything. Nayland was quiet for a long moment. You want to save me because I understand your pain? No, he met her eyes. I want to save you because you saved me first. And because everybody deserves a chance to be more than the worst thing that happened to them. She studied him, weighing something he couldn't see. Then she nodded, once, decisive. Marcus say marriage protect me. He say legal wife cannot be taken. Ethan's heart stuttered. Nayland, I not asking you love me. I not offering to love you. Her voice was firm, practical. But Marcus is right. Marriage is protection. For both of us, maybe. I can't ask you to do that. You not asking. I am offering. She tilted her head. Unless you have someone else you wish to marry? Despite everything, Ethan almost laughed. No, no one else. Then we make arrangement. I stay, help with ranch. You protect me from bounty hunters. We are partners, not husband and wife in truth, just on paper. It made a terrible kind of sense. Practical, logical, a solution to a problem that had no good answers. But Ethan had married once for love, and that love had ended in a grave he still visited when the loneliness got too sharp. The idea of marriage as mere transaction felt like betraying something sacred. Then again, sacred things didn't seem to last in his experience. If we do this, he said slowly, it's not just on paper. If you're my wife, I protect you, provide for you, stand between you and anyone who tries to hurt you. That's what the vow means. Nayland's expression softened, just a fraction. And what I vow, to be honest with me, to work beside me, to not run off in the night without word. He paused. To let me help you grieve your daughter instead of carrying that alone. She blinked rapidly, fighting something that might have been tears. You ask much. So do you. A slow smile touched her lips, the first real smile he'd seen from her arm. It transformed her face, made her look young and alive instead of haunted. Then we have agreement, Ethan Cord. I will be your wife who is not wife, and you will be my husband who is not husband. And maybe we both survive long enough to see if honest partnership is possible between Apache woman and white rancher. She held out her hand, not in the white man's way, but palm down, Apache style. Ethan placed his hand over hers, feeling the calluses and scars that matched his own. We'll need Marcus to do it proper, he said. Make it legal. Then we ask him. Before 2 weeks end. They stood there as the sun set, hands clasped, making promises neither of them fully understood. And somewhere in the desert night, forces were already moving. Husband seeking wife, bounty hunters seeking reward, and an old woman carrying guilt so heavy it bent her spine, walking toward a reckoning none of them could imagine. But for this moment in the fading light, two broken people found something neither expected. Not love, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of trust. And in a world built on broken promises and old hatreds, that was miracle enough. 3 weeks had passed since the quiet agreement between Ethan and Nayland, and the ranch had settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Almost because nothing about their situation was normal, and both of them knew it. Nalin moved through the days with purpose now, no longer the ghost haunting his property, but something more solid, more present. She taught him words in Apache, simple things at first. Water was Tu, horse was Li, guy was Yadiho. He taught her to read beyond the basic mission school lessons, starting with the names carved into wooden markers he'd made for each of his horses. Thunder, the big gray stallion. Dus, the sorrel mare with the white blaze. Hope, the youngest filly, born the spring after his wife died and named in defiance of despair. Hope, Nayland had repeated, testing the word on her tongue. Strange name for horse. Strange name for anything in this country, Ethan agreed, but we need it anyway. She had looked at him then with something that might have been understanding or might have been pity. He couldn't tell which, and found he didn't much care. They were learning each other's languages, and language was the first step toward something that resembled trust. The work brought them together in ways conversation couldn't. Fixing fence posts in the hot sun, him holding the posts steady while she tamped down the earth. Mucking out stalls in the cool of the barn, working in companionable silence broken only by the soft sounds of horses shifting in their boxes. And one memorable evening when the roof had sprung a leak during a brief storm, both of them scrambling to patch it before the rain soaked through. Nayland had slipped on the wet shingles, her feet going out from under her. Ethan grabbed her wrist on instinct, pulling her back from the edge. For a moment they had frozen there, her dark eyes wide with surprise, his heart hammering from fear of what almost happened. Then she had laughed, actually laughed, a sound like water over stones that he hadn't known she could make. White man's roof very dangerous, she'd said. Apache woman very clumsy, he'd shot back. She'd pushed him, not hard, just enough to make him wobble. He'd grabbed for balance, caught her shoulder instead, and they'd both gone down in a tangle of limbs and curses, landing hard on the shingles but safe. Safe and laughing like fools while the rain came down around them. It was the first time since she'd arrived that Ethan had felt something other than guilt or grief when he looked at her. Something lighter. Something that might have been the beginning of friendship, but the lightness couldn't last. Not in a world where $300 bought men's souls and old hatreds ran deeper than any promise. Marcus Holland returned on a Tuesday morning, riding up to the house with the slow deliberation of a man carrying bad news. Ethan saw him coming from the corral where he was working with Thunder, trying to gentle the stallion enough for saddle work. Nayland was in the house, kneading dough for the bread she'd learned to make using his mother's old recipe. Marcus. Ethan climbed out of the corral, dusting off his hands. Wasn't expecting you back so soon. Wish I didn't have to be here. Marcus dismounted, his face grim. But we need to talk, and it can't wait. Ethan's gut tightened. What happened? Bounty hunters arrived in Red Bluff 3 days ago. 6 of them, mean as snakes and twice as quick to bite. They're asking questions, lots of questions. Marcus pulled a folded paper from his jacket. And they got this. Word is they'll be searching this area within the week. You don't have much time. Marcus pulled a folded paper from his jacket. And they got this. The paper was a wanted poster, crudely drawn but effective enough. It showed an Apache woman with long dark hair, the words beneath in English and Spanish both. Wanted for murder. $300 reward. Dangerous. Armed. Below the drawing a name. Nayland. They know she's here? Ethan's voice came out steady despite the fear crawling up his spine. They know she's somewhere in this area. Found tracks leading south from the reservation. Lost them in the rocks. But they're searching. Systematic. Professional. Marcus met his eyes. It's only a matter of time, Ethan. From inside the house, Ethan heard the soft sounds of Nayland moving around. She would have heard the horse, would know Marcus was here, would be listening. The offer you made before, Ethan said quietly, about marriage making her legal. That still stand? Marcus's eyebrows rose. You asking what I think you're asking? I'm asking if you can marry us, today, now, before those bounty hunters get any closer. Ethan, you understand what that means. You'll be tied to her in the eyes of the law. When her husband comes, and he will come, you'll be standing between him and his property according to Apache custom. She's not property. To him she is. To his clan she is. And those 6 bounty hunters don't give a damn about nuance. Marcus sighed heavily. But yes, I can do it. I'm licensed to perform marriages in the territory. Won't be fancy. Don't need fancy, just need legal. Marcus nodded slowly. Then get her hump-it-cur. We'll do this proper, or as proper as it can be given the circumstances. Ethan walked to the house, each step feeling heavier than the last. This wasn't how marriage was supposed to happen. No courtship, no love, just two desperate people trying to survive in a world that wanted to destroy them both. But survival was its own kind of devotion, wasn't it? Its own kind of promise. Nayland stood in the kitchen, her hands white with flour, her eyes on the door. She'd known why Marcus was here before Ethan said a word. The bounty hunters, she said. Not a question. In Red Bluff, searching. He paused. Marcus can marry us today. Make it legal. Make it real enough that they can't just take you. Real enough is not same as real. No, but it's what we have. She looked down at her flour-covered hands, at the simple dress she wore, one of his mother's old ones that he'd found in the trunk. Not wedding clothes, not anything close. But when she looked up again, her jaw was set with that determination he'd come to recognize. I will wash, then we do this thing. She moved past him to the wash basin, scrubbing her hands clean with methodical precision. Then she did something that surprised him. She unpinned her hair, letting it fall loose around her shoulders, and began to braid it in an intricate pattern he'd never seen before. Apache women wear hair this way for important ceremonies, she said, catching his look. If we do this, we do it with respect, for both our peoples. Ethan found himself nodding. He went to his room, the one he'd barely used since Nellen arrived, and pulled out the only good shirt he owned. It was wrinkled from years in the trunk, but it was clean. His hands shook slightly as he buttoned it, a tremor he couldn't quite control. He was getting married. Again. To a woman he barely knew for reasons that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with survival. His first wife would have laughed at the absurdity of it, or maybe she would have understood. Sarah had always understood things he couldn't put into words. When he emerged, Nellen was waiting on the porch with Marcus. She had changed into a different dress, this one with beadwork along the collar that he hadn't seen before. She must have been hiding it, saving it for something important. You keep Apache dress, he observed. Always keep something from home, even home that turns its back. She smoothed the beadwork with gentle fingers. My mother made this. Only thing I have of hers now. The weight of that statement settled over them all. We should begin, Marcus said quietly, before I lose my nerve for helping you two commit what half the territory would call treason. They stood together in front of Ethan's small porch, the morning sun warm on their backs. Marcus pulled a small book from his jacket, a Bible worn soft from years of use. He opened it to a marked page, then looked at them both. Normally I'd give a speech about love and commitment, about building a life together in joy and sorrow. His voice was gentle, but I don't think that's what you need to hear. What do we need to hear? Nayland asked. The truth, that marriage is a promise to stand together when everything tries to tear you apart. That it's choosing someone every day, even when easier paths present themselves. Marcus looked at Ethan. You've lost before. You know what that costs. Are you willing to risk it again? Ethan thought about the question, really thought about it. He could say no, could send Nalen away, could return to his quiet life of grief and isolation. Safe, alone, slowly dying inside while pretending to live. Or he could step forward into uncertainty with this woman who had saved his life and asked nothing in return except a chance to be seen as human. I'm willing, he said. Marcus turned to Nayland. And you could run, disappear into Mexico, into Apache territory farther south. You're not trapped here. I am trapped everywhere, Natsumanen replied. My people call me murderer. Your people call me savage. But this man, he call me by my name. He bury my daughter with honor. He offer protection without asking for payment I cannot give. She paused. I am willing also. Then we'll keep this simple. Marcus closed the Bible, set it aside. Ethan Cord, do you take this woman as your lawful wife to protect and provide for, in the eyes of God and the law of this territory? I do. Nalen, Marcus paused. I don't know your family name. No family now. Nalen is enough. Marcus nodded. Nalen, do you take this man as your lawful husband to stand beside him in the eyes of God and the law of this territory? She looked at Ethan, really looked at him, as if seeing something she hadn't noticed before. I do. Then by the power vested in me as sheriff of Red Bluff and licensed officiant of this territory, I declare you husband and wife. Marcus pulled out a paper already filled in with their names. Sign here, both of you. Make it official. Ethan signed first, his handwriting shakier than usual. Then he handed the pen to Nalen. She held it awkwardly, the mission school training rusty from disuse. But she managed to write her name in careful letters. Marcus signed as witness, then folded the paper and tucked it into his jacket. I'll file this in Red Bluff. Soon as it's recorded, you're protected by law. Won't stop everyone, but it'll stop enough. Thank you, Ethan said, for everything. Don't thank me yet. I just made you a target. Marcus swung back into his saddle. Those bounty hunters find out she's here and married. They'll come for you both. And Ethan, her husband, Kaya, word is he's gathering warriors. Apache don't take kindly to their women being claimed by white men, legal or not. We'll handle it. You better. Marcus tipped his hat to Nolan. London, ma'am, welcome to being a citizen of this territory, for whatever that's worth. He rode away, leaving them standing together in the morning light. Husband and wife on paper, strangers in reality, bound by necessity and a promise neither of them fully understood. Nolan spoke first. We are married now. Legally, yes. But not in truth. Not unless you want it to be. Ethan met her eyes. I meant what I told Marcus. I'll protect you, provide for you. But I won't demand anything you're not willing to give. She studied him for a long moment. Then with deliberate slowness, she reached out and took his hand. Not the formal Apache greeting, but the simple gesture of fingers intertwining, palm to palm. Apache have traditions, she said softly. When two people marry, they exchange hair, braided together, symbol of lives woven as one. We don't have to do that. This isn't a real marriage. Is real enough. She released his hand, pulled a small knife from her belt. Before he could protest, she cut a lock of her own hair, the dark strands gleaming in the sun. Then she held out the knife to him. You cut also. Ethan hesitated, then took the knife. He cut a piece of his own hair, shorter and lighter than hers. Nolan took both locks, sat down on the porch steps, and began to braid them together with quick, practiced movements. The dark and light strands twisted around each other, creating a pattern that was neither one nor the other, but something new. When she finished, she tied it off with a thin strip of leather and held it up. Now we are truly married, Apache way and white way both. She tucked the braided lock into a small pouch at her waist, then stood and went back into the house without another word, leaving Ethan sitting on the steps, staring at his hand where she'd held it, trying to understand what had just happened. He'd married an Apache woman to protect her from bounty hunters. That was the plan. Simple. Practical. But somehow in the space between legal vows and braided hair, something had shifted. Something that felt dangerously close to real. The peaceful days ended 5 days later. Ethan was in the barn, checking on a mare that had thrown a shoe, when he heard Nalen's sharp whistle from the house. It was their signal, the one they'd practiced. Danger approaching. He grabbed his rifle and moved to the barn door, scanning the horizon. At first he saw nothing. Then movement on the eastern ridge. Riders. Too far to count, but enough to be a problem. Nolan appeared at his elbow, silent as smoke. She held the old pistol he'd given her for protection, her face calm despite the tension in her shoulders. How many? He asked. 8, maybe 9. Moving slow, her eyes narrowed. Not bounty hunters. These ride like Apache, like warriors. Ethan's blood ran cold. Your husband? Maybe, or men from his clan. She paused. They not come to talk, Ethan. They come to take back what they think is theirs. You're not theirs, not anymore. Apache laws say different. I am wife until Kaya say I not wife. Marriage to you mean nothing to my people. The riders came closer, resolving into individual shapes. Ethan counted 8 men on horseback, all Apache, all armed. They rode with the casual confidence of men who knew the land and knew how to fight on it. At their head, a young man with long hair and a face that might have been handsome if not for the cold anger etched into every line. Kaya, Nolan breathed. The riders stopped 50 yards from the house, spreading out in a loose semicircle. Kaya dismounted, his movements fluid and controlled. He was younger than Ethan expected, mid-20s at most, wearing a mix of Apache clothing and items traded from whites. A pistol at his hip, a rifle slung across his back. Nolan! His voice carried across the distance, sharp and commanding. I know you are here. Come out. Ethan stepped out of the barn, rifle held low but ready. She's not going anywhere. Kaya's eyes fixed on him, assessing. You are the white man, the one who hides my wife. I'm not hiding anyone. Nolan is here of her own free will. She has no will. She is wife. She belongs with her husband. Kaya took 3 steps forward. You do not understand Apache ways. Woman cannot choose to leave marriage, cannot choose to live with another man. Maybe that's a problem with Apache ways. Several of the mounted warriors shifted, hands moving toward weapons. Kaya held up a hand, stopping them. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost reasonable. I did not come to fight, white man. I come to bring my wife home, to clear her name. Nalan stepped out from behind Ethan, her chin raised in defiance. You come too late, Kaya. I have new home now. Kaya's face twisted with something that might have been pain or rage. You betray your people for this? For white man who killed Apache? Who destroyed our villages? I betray no one. You betrayed me. Your mother betrayed me. You let her kill our daughter and then blame me for it. A ripple went through the mounted warriors. Clearly not all of them knew this part of the story. You were mad with grief, Kaya said, but his voice lacked conviction. You imagined things. I imagined nothing. Nalan's voice was steel. I saw your mother's hands on our daughter's throat. I saw the mark she left, and I saw you choose her over truth. Kaya was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, become something softer and more desperate. My mother confessed, 2 weeks ago. She told the council what she did. He paused. They sent me to bring you back, to restore your name, to restore our marriage. Ethan felt Nalan stiffen beside him. My mother cannot live with guilt, Kaya continued. She walks the death path now, seeking redemption. The council has declared you innocent. You can come home, Nalan. Your daughter can be buried with honor among our people. It was a good offer, better than Ethan had expected. Returned to her people, cleared of accusations, her name restored. Everything she'd lost, given back. He waited for her to accept, to walk away from this strange arrangement they'd made. Instead, she said, no. Kaya blinked. No, I will not return. I am married to Ethan Cord now. Legal marriage recognized by white law. I am his wife. The words hit Ethan like a thunderbolt. She'd said wife, not just on paper, but with conviction, as if she meant it. Kaya's face darkened. You cannot marry, white man. Our marriage still stands. Your marriage died when you let your mother kill our child and then blamed me for it. Nalan's voice was hard as stone. I choose new life now, with man who sees me as person, not property. You choose betrayal. I choose freedom. Kaya's hand dropped to his pistol. Instantly, Ethan raised his rifle, not aiming yet, but ready. Behind Kaya, the mounted warriors drew weapons. The morning air crackled with violence, held barely in check. Then, from behind the warriors, a new voice spoke, old and cracked and heavy with sorrow. Let her go, my son. The warriors parted, revealing a figure Ethan hadn't noticed before. An old woman, bent with age and grief, riding a small pony. Her face was a map of wrinkles, her eyes sunken but still sharp. She wore the black of mourning, her gray hair loose and uncombed. Mother, Kaya said, you should not be here. I should be nowhere but here. The old woman Elu dismounted with difficulty. She walked forward, leaning heavily on a walking stick. When she reached Kaya, she put a hand on his arm. I come to face the woman I wronged, to speak truth before I walk the death path. She turned to Nalan, and Ethan saw tears on the old woman's weathered cheeks. I killed your daughter, Elu said in clear English. I put my hands on her throat and I squeezed until she stopped breathing. Then I put her blood on your hands while you slept, and I told my son you were the killer. Nalan stood frozen, her face pale. I did this because I am broken, Elu continued. My 3 sons died from white man's bullets. All my boys, all my hope, gone. When your daughter was born, I looked at her and saw only another child who would grow up to bury sons. Another mother who would know my pain. So I thought, I give her quick death, merciful death, save her from long suffering. The old woman's voice cracked. But there is no mercy in murder. Only evil. Only the kind of hate that eats you from inside until there is nothing left but hollow shell. She fell to her knees in the dust, her walking stick falling beside her. I come to ask your forgiveness, Nalan, not because I deserve it, but because I cannot die without speaking truth. Nalan stared at the old woman, her body trembling. Ethan could see the war happening inside her. Rage and grief and old pain, all fighting for dominance. He wanted to touch her, to offer comfort, but this moment was hers alone. When Nalan finally spoke, her voice was low and controlled. You want me to forgive you for killing my daughter? For destroying my life? For making me ghost among my own people? I want nothing. I deserve nothing. Elu looked up with rheumy eyes. I only speak truth so you know. You were never murderer, never mad, never evil. Only mother who lost everything because of old woman's broken heart. Nolan took 3 steps forward, standing over Elu. For a long moment, Ethan thought she might strike the old woman. Instead, she knelt down, bringing herself to eye level. "I do not forgive you," Nayland said quietly. "I cannot. You killed my child. No words change that. No confession heals that wound." Elu nodded, accepting. "But I pity you," Nolan continued. "You lost 3 sons. I lost 1 daughter. We both know that pain. We both carry that death." She paused. "I pity you because you let hate turn you into killer. I choose different path. I choose to live despite pain, to find new purpose, new family." She stood, turned to Kaya. "Your mother spoke truth. Now I speak mine. I will not return. I will not be your wife again. I am married to Ethan Cord, and I choose to stay married. If you have honor, you will respect my choice." Kaya looked like a man torn in half. His eyes moved between Nayland, his mother, and Ethan. "You asked me to let you go? To accept this shame? I ask you to let me live." A long silence stretched between them. The mounted warriors waited, tense and ready. Ethan kept his rifle up, his finger near the trigger. One wrong word, one wrong move, and blood would flow. Then Elu spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. "Let her go, my son. I have caused enough death. Do not add more to my burden." Kaya closed his eyes, his jaw working. When he opened them again, something had changed. The anger was still there, but tempered by something else. Resignation, maybe, or the beginnings of understanding. "You were a good wife," he said to Nolan. "I failed you. I should have believed you about my mother. I should have chosen truth over duty." He paused. "I cannot force you to return. I will tell the council you have made your choice. They will honor it." Relief flooded through Ethan, but he didn't lower the rifle yet. Kaya turned to him. "You take care of her, white man. You protect her the way I did not. Or I will come back, and next time I will not come to talk." "Understood." Kaya helped his mother to her feet, guiding her back to her pony. The old woman looked back at Nolan one more time, her face etched with sorrow that had no end. "I go to the high places now," Elu said, "to make peace with my sons before I join them. May you find peace also, Nolan. May your daughter's spirit rest easy knowing her mother survived." The warriors began to turn their horses. Ethan thought it was over, then he heard it. The sound of hoofbeats coming fast from the west. Not Apache. These were shod horses, ridden hard by men who didn't care about stealth. 6 riders crested the ridge, spread out in attack formation. White men, armed with rifles and pistols, their faces hard with the kind of violence that came from making money off others' suffering. Bounty hunters. The lead rider, a man with a scar bisecting his face from forehead to jaw, raised his rifle and fired. The bullet kicked up dust at Kaya's feet. "That's far enough, Indians," the scarred man shouted. "We're here for the woman, the Apache squaw with the bounty. Hand her over and nobody gets hurt." Kaya's hand went to his pistol. His warriors wheeled their horses, forming a defensive line. The bounty hunters spread out wider, rifles trained on the Apache. Ethan found himself in the middle of a standoff he'd never imagined. Apache warriors on one side, white bounty hunters on the other, and Nolan, the woman both sides wanted, standing beside him. The scarred man's eyes found Nayland, and his smile was cruel. "There she is, murderous squaw, worth $300 to us, dead or alive, though I'm thinking dead is easier." "She's under my protection," Ethan called out, "and she's my legal wife. You can't touch her." "Legal wife?" The scarred man laughed. "Don't care if she's married to God himself. Bounty says dead or alive, and we aim to collect." 3 of the bounty hunters had their rifles trained on the Apache. The other 3 were aimed at Ethan and Nayland. It was a kill box, and they were all standing in it. Kaya spoke, his voice carrying across the tension. "These men kill Apache warrior for white man's gold. This is honor you white men speak of?" The scarred man spat. "Ain't about honor. It's about money. Now we can do this easy or hard. Easy as you. Indians ride off. We take the squaw. Everyone lives. Hard as we shoot you all and take her anyway." One of Kaya's warriors raised his rifle. The bounty hunters tensed. Ethan could feel it building, the moment before violence erupted, when every man was calculating angles and odds and whether they'd be the one left standing. Then Marcus Holland's voice cut through the standoff like a knife. "Nobody's shooting anybody." The sheriff rode in from the south, alone but carrying himself with the authority of law. He positioned his horse between the 2 groups, his hand resting on his pistol, but not drawing. "Marcus," the scarred man said, "this ain't your business. We got legal bounty." And I got legal marriage certificate says that woman is Mrs. Ethan Cord, citizen of this territory. Bounty don't apply to citizens legally wed. Marcus pulled out the folded paper, held it up. Says so right here. Filed and recorded proper. That's horseshit and you know it. Maybe, but it's legal horseshit, which makes it my business. Marcus's voice hardened. Now you boys can ride back to town, collect your horse, and move on. Or you can try to collect that bounty and find yourselves facing federal charges for assaulting a lawful citizen. Your choice. The scarred man's face reddened. You protecting a squaw over your own kind? I'm protecting the law. That's my job. Marcus turned to Kaya. And you. Take your men and go. Your wife made her choice. Honor it. For a long, terrible moment, nobody moved. The morning sun beat down on them all, white men and Apache and the woman who belonged to neither, caught in a web of laws and customs and hatreds none of them had created, but all of them were forced to live with. Then Kaya did something unexpected. He rode forward, past Marcus, past the bounty hunters, until he was close enough to speak directly to Nolan. I loved you, he said quietly, in my own way, but I loved my duty more, my family more. That was my mistake. He paused. Be happy, Nolan. Something I could never give you. He turned his horse and rode away, his warriors following. Elu went with them, her bent form swaying on the pony, a woman walking toward death with a confession finally spoken. The bounty hunters watched them go, their rifles lowering slightly but not completely. This ain't over, the scarred man said to Marcus. Law's one thing. What happens out here in the desert is another. Then I guess you better make sure I don't hear about anyone getting hurt out in the desert, Marcus replied calmly. Because if I do, I'll know exactly where to come looking. The bounty hunters sat their horses for another moment, weighing odds that had just turned sharply against them. Then the scarred man spat again and wheeled his horse. Come on, boys, ain't worth federal trouble. Other bounties out there. They rode off toward Red Bluff, leaving dust and threats hanging in the air. When they were gone, Marcus turned to Ethan and Nolan. That was closer than I like. Thank you, Ethan said, for everything. Don't thank me. I just made this whole county your enemy. Marcus looked at Nolan. Ma'am, you're legal now, but legal don't mean safe. Those boys will talk. Word will spread. You got to be ready for what comes next. Nolan nodded. I am ready. We are ready. Marcus's eyes moved between them, seeing something that made him smile slightly. You know, when I married you two, I thought it was just paperwork, protection on paper. But I'm thinking maybe it's becoming something else. Maybe, Ethan said. Maybe is enough to start with. Marcus gathered his reins. I'll keep an eye out. Send word if I hear anything you need to know. Meanwhile, you two take care of each other. He rode away, leaving Ethan and Nolan standing in front of the house, the morning's violence fading into memory and dust. Nolan turned to face Ethan. Her hand found his, fingers intertwining the way they had after the wedding. You stood for me, against your own people, against mine, knowing you could die. You're my wife. That's what the vow means. On paper. Not just on paper. Not anymore. He squeezed her hand gently. When Kaya offered to take you back, to clear your name, to give you everything you lost, I thought you'd go. Part of me hoped you would. Safer for you. But you stayed. You called yourself my wife, like you meant it. Nolan studied his face, her dark eyes searching for something. I did mean it. Somewhere between braiding our hair and standing beside you against bounty hunters, this became real for me. Not love. Not yet. But real. Real is where we begin, Ethan said. Everything else, we'll figure out together. They stood there in the morning sun, hands clasped, two people who had married for survival, discovering that survival might be the beginning of something neither of them had expected. Something that felt dangerously, wonderfully close to hope. What do we do now? Nolan asked. Now? Ethan smiled, the first genuine smile he'd worn in years. Now we go inside, we eat breakfast, we work the ranch, we live, Nolan. We just live and see what happens. She smiled back, and the expression transformed her face from merely beautiful to luminous. Living sounds good? I have forgotten how to do that. You teach me? If you teach me in return. Been a while since I knew how myself. They walked into the house together, husband and wife in truth now, building something new from the broken pieces of their pasts. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly in all directions, harsh and unforgiving and utterly indifferent to human hope. But inside, in the cool adobe walls of a house built by a man trying to escape his ghosts, two people were learning that hope didn't need the world's permission to exist. It only needed two willing hearts and the courage to try 'em. The storms weren't over. More would come, harder and more dangerous than what they'd face today. But they would face them together, and that made all the difference. In the kitchen, Nalin returned to her bread dough, kneading it with practiced motions. Ethan watched her work, seeing not an Apache woman or a wife on paper, but simply Nalin, a person who had saved his life and given him reason to believe in tomorrows again. Ethan? She looked up from the dough. Yeah? Thank you for choosing me when you did not have to. Thank you for staying when you could have run. She nodded, understanding passing between them without need for more words. They had chosen each other in the space between law and love, between survival and surrender. What grew from that choice remained to be seen. But for the first time in 4 years, Ethan Cord felt something other than grief when he thought about the future. And for the first time since her daughter's death, Nalin felt something other than rage when she woke each morning. It wasn't happiness, not yet, but it was close enough to see from here. And that, in a hard land among hard people, was its own kind of miracle. 6 months passed like water through cupped hands, precious and impossible to hold on to completely. The seasons turned, autumn giving way to the bite of winter in the high desert, and the ranch settled into rhythms that felt almost like peace. Almost, because peace was a fragile thing in country built on old blood and newer hatreds. Ethan woke each morning to the sound of Nalin moving through the house, her footsteps soft but purposeful. She no longer slept in the barn. After the confrontation with Kaya and the bounty hunters, after standing together against men who wanted her dead or gone, something had shifted. She'd moved into the second room, the one Ethan had kept locked for so long, the one filled with reminders of the family he'd lost. Together they had cleared it out. Not forgetting, Nalin had insisted, but making space for new memories alongside the old. The baby clothes went into a trunk. The cradle stayed, but Nalin had woven new blankets for it, Apache patterns mixed with the quilting style Ethan's mother had taught him to recognize. A marriage of worlds, she'd called it, a bridge between what was and what might be. The work on the ranch continued, harder now as winter approached. They repaired fences before the ground froze too hard for post holes, stockpiled hay for the horses, hunted deer and rabbit for meat to smoke and preserve. Nellen proved herself a better shot than Ethan with a rifle, her Apache upbringing making her patient and precise. He was better with a rope, his years as a rancher giving him an edge in handling the horses. They taught each other constantly. She showed him how to find water in seemingly dry ground, how to read animal tracks to know what had passed through and when. He taught her to keep books for the ranch, to record sales and expenses in the neat columns his wife Sarah had once maintained. Nellen's handwriting grew stronger each day, her confidence with English expanding beyond the basics. At night, they sat by the fire and talked. Real conversations now, not the careful politeness of strangers or the terse exchanges of business partners. She told him about growing up as the daughter of a chief, the pressure and privilege that came with it, the mission school that had tried to beat the Apache out of her and failed, her mother's quiet strength and her father's distant affection. He told her about his brother Daniel, the gulf between them that had started in childhood and never closed, about Sarah, his first wife, and the baby that never drew breath, about the guilt that had driven him from the fort to this isolated ranch where he'd thought he could outrun memory. "You cannot outrun memory," Nalin said one evening, her voice soft in the firelight. "It follows like shadow. You can only learn to walk with it." "And have you learned that?" She was quiet for a long moment, her hands working a piece of beadwork she'd started. "I am learning, some days better than others. I think of my daughter every morning when I wake. Wonder what she would look like now, what her laugh would sound like." Her voice caught. "But pain is less sharp now, more like old scar than fresh wound." Ethan understood. His own grief had settled into something similar, a permanent ache that no longer consumed but simply existed alongside everything else. Life, he was learning, was the art of carrying loss without letting it crush you. The townsfolk of Red Bluff remained divided about the Apache woman living as wife to one of their own. Some, like Marcus, accepted it with varying degrees of grace. Others made their disapproval known through cold stares and whispered conversations that stopped when Ethan walked past. He'd stopped going to town as much, sending Marcus orders for supplies and paying a premium to have them delivered. It was easier than subjecting Nalin to the kind of hatred that wore polite faces but cut just as deep as any knife. But isolation had its own costs, and Ethan could see them accumulating in the set of Nalin's shoulders when she thought he wasn't looking, in the way she sometimes stood on the porch staring toward the distant Apache lands with an expression he couldn't quite read. Do you regret staying? He asked one morning as they worked together to repair a section of the barn roof damaged by winter wind. Nayland paused, hammer in hand. I regret many things. Staying here is not one of them. But, but sometimes I wonder what my life would be if I had made different choices. If I had been born in different time, when Apache and White could exist without always being enemies. She looked at him. Do you regret taking me in? No, but I wonder if I've given you a life worth living or just a different kind of prison. She set down the hammer, climbed across the roof to where he worked. Her hand found his, work-worn fingers intertwining with his own. You gave me choice, Ethan. First time in my life, man asked what I wanted instead of telling me what I must do. That is not prison. That is freedom, even if freedom is complicated. He turned his hand to grip hers properly. 6 months ago, this casual touch would have been unthinkable. Now it felt natural, right in ways he'd stopped questioning. I want you to be happy, he said. Not just safe, not just surviving. Happy. Nolan's smile was small but genuine. I am working toward happy. Give me time. And time was something they had, out here at the edge of civilization where the world moved slower and the future stretched uncertain, but no longer quite so frightening. The messenger came on a cold December morning when frost still clung to the ground and breath misted white in the air. Ethan was in the corral working with a young gelding when he saw the rider approaching from the east. Apache, by the way, he sat his horse, but carrying a white flag tied to a long stick. The traditional signal of parley, of words, not war. Nolan emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. She watched the rider with an intensity that made Ethan's stomach tighten with worry. The rider was young, barely 20, with the lean build of someone who'd grown up on horseback. He stopped at the edge of Ethan's property, respecting the boundary while making clear he came in peace.
I seek Nalin, daughter of Chief Nantai, the young man called in Apache, then repeated in accented English. I bring message from the Council of Elders. Nalin stepped forward, her spine straight with the pride Ethan had come to recognize as her armor against fear. I am Nalin. Speak your message. The young man dismounted, approached with careful respect. He pulled a small bundle from his saddlebag, wrapped in deerskin and tied with sinew. The elder Elu has walked the death path. She took poison as is her right, having confessed her crimes before the council. He paused. Before she died, she asked that this be given to you. He held out the bundle. Nayland took it with trembling hands, her face gone pale. She unwrapped it slowly, revealing a small blanket intricately beaded with patterns Ethan had never seen. Blue and white and yellow, colors that seemed to shimmer even in the weak winter light. This was meant for your daughter, the young man continued softly. Elu worked on it for many moons before the child was born. She finished it the night before she took the poison. She said to tell you that she hopes your daughter's spirit can forgive what her hands could not undo. Nalin's fingers traced the beadwork, tears streaming down her face unchecked. She made this? For my daughter? Yes. And she asked the council to send me with second message. The young man's voice grew formal. The council declares your name cleared. You are no longer ghost or exile. You are welcome to return to your people if you wish. Your daughter will be given proper burial ceremony, her name spoken in the ceremonies of remembrance. Ethan felt his heart stop. This was it. The moment Nayland could reclaim everything she'd lost. Her people, her place, her identity as Apache instead of the liminal space she occupied here, neither fully white nor fully native, accepted by neither world completely. Nayland stood silent for a long moment, the blanket clutched to her chest. Then she looked at Ethan, and he saw the war happening behind her eyes. I need time, she said to the messenger, to think, to decide. The young man nodded. The council gives you until spring thaw. Then they must know your answer. He remounted his horse. I am sorry for your loss, Nayland. Your daughter deserved better than what fate gave her. He rode away, leaving them standing in the cold morning with the weight of impossible choices settling over them like snow. Nayland didn't speak. She walked into the house, still clutching the blanket, and closed the door of her room behind her. Ethan heard the soft sound of crying, muffled but unmistakable, and every instinct screamed at him to go to her, to offer comfort. But some grief was private. Some decisions had to be made alone. He gave her the day. That night she emerged as he was preparing a simple supper of beans and cornbread. Her eyes were red but dry, her face composed with visible effort. "I want to show you something," she said. She led him outside toward the small rise where they'd buried her daughter 6 months ago. The grave was well tended, marked with smooth river stones Nylon had arranged in traditional Apache patterns. Someone had been leaving offerings there, Ethan realized. Small things. A feather. A piece of turquoise. Nylon's quiet way of honoring the child who'd never had a chance at life. She knelt by the grave, spread the beaded blanket over the stones. "Elu made this for you, little one, made it with hands that killed you, but also with heart that broke from what those hands had done." Her voice was steady now, strong. "I do not forgive her, but I understand her a little better now." She stood, turned to face Ethan. "The council offers me return, my name cleared, my daughter honored, everything I lost, given back. I know. Part of me wants to accept, to go home, to be among my people again, to not always be looking over my shoulder wondering if next white man I meet will see me as human or as something to be destroyed. That's understandable. But other part of me knows truth." She stepped closer, took his hands in hers. "My home is not Apache land anymore. My home is here, with you. In this place we have built together from broken pieces." Ethan's throat tightened. "Nayland, you don't have to choose me out of gratitude or obligation. If you want to go back to your people, I understand. I'll help you. I'll make sure you get there safely." "You think I stay because of gratitude?" Her laugh was soft, almost sad. "Ethan Cord, you are smart man about many things. But about this, you are fool." "Then why?" "Because somewhere between marriage on paper and marriage in truth, I fell in love with you." The words hung in the cold air between them, more shocking than any gunshot. "You," Ethan started, then had to stop, his voice breaking. "You love me?" "I love you. I love the way you buried my daughter like she was your own. I love how you teach me to read without making me feel stupid for not knowing. I love your patience with horses and your terrible jokes and the way you look at me like I am precious thing, not burden or duty." She paused. "I love that you give me choice, always choice, even when my choice might break your heart." Ethan pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her with a fierceness that surprised them both. "I love you too. God help me, I didn't mean to. Didn't think I could after Sarah. But you walked into my life covered in blood and carrying death, and somehow you made me want to live again." They stood there in the fading light, holding each other beside the grave of a child who had brought them together through tragedy. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of coming snow and the distant howl of coyotes singing their evening songs. When they finally pulled apart, Nolan's face was wet with tears, but she was smiling. "So I stay. This is my answer to the council. I stay with my husband, in our home, building our life." "Are you sure?" "More sure than I have been about anything." She took his hand, placed it on her stomach. "Especially now." It took Ethan a moment to understand. When he did, his knees nearly buckled. "You're pregnant?" "I think so. Not certain yet, but my body tells me yes." Her eyes searched his face, looking for his reaction. "Is this good news, or does it frighten you?" "It terrifies me," he admitted. "After losing one child, the thought of risking that pain again." He paused. "But it also fills me with more hope than I've felt in years. A child. Our child. Nolan. That's everything." 6 months passed like water through time, and spring came to the desert with rare abundance. Wildflowers bloomed where there had been only dust, and the ranch thrived under their combined care. Nayland's pregnancy progressed without complication. Desba, the Apache midwife who had delivered Nalene herself, came when the time drew near, bringing with her the old ways and quiet confidence that eased Ethan's fears more than any doctor could. The labor began on a warm morning when the desert air smelled of creosote and new growth. Ethan paced the porch while Desba worked inside, every cry from Nayland driving spikes of terror through his heart. He had lost so much already. The thought of losing her, of losing this chance at family, nearly brought him to his knees. Then he heard it, a baby's cry, thin and strong and unmistakably alive. Desba opened the door, her weathered face transformed by a smile. "You have a son, healthy and fighting like his mother." Ethan found Nayland exhausted but radiant, cradling a tiny bundle against her chest. When she looked up at him, her eyes shone with tears and joy in equal measure. "We have a son, Ethan. Our son." He knelt beside the bed, looking at the small face barely visible in the blanket. The baby had his mother's dark hair and a blend of features that marked him as belonging to both worlds. When Ethan took him, the weight felt both terrifyingly fragile and impossibly precious. "What do we name him?" Nayland asked. Ethan thought of his brother Daniel, whose mistakes had set this whole journey in motion, of Nalan's father Nantai, whose wisdom she carried, of the hope that this child represented. "Daniel Nantai Cord," he said, "a bridge between our peoples." "May he build many bridges in his life," Desba said softly, "and may he never have to choose between the bloods that flow in his veins." That night, with his wife sleeping peacefully and his son in the cradle beside their bed, Ethan stood at the window looking out at the moonlit desert. The same land where he had almost died, the same land where Nalin had saved him, and in saving him had saved them both. The road had been long and hard. Loss and grief had nearly destroyed them both. But somehow, through all the pain and fear and impossible choices, they had found each other. They had built something that the world said could not exist. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would always be those who could not accept what they represented. But tonight, in this quiet moment, they had everything that mattered: a family, a home, a future built on love instead of hate. The desert stretched endlessly beyond the window, harsh and beautiful and utterly indifferent to human hope. But inside these adobe walls, hope had taken root anyway. And when the dust finally settled, that was enough. Marcus visited 3 days later, bringing gifts and a rare smile. He held the baby with surprising gentleness for such a big man, his weathered face softening. "Town's talking," he said. "Some good, some bad. But Doc Miller said to tell you congratulations. And Mrs. Chen from the general store sent these." He handed over a package of baby clothes, simple but carefully made. "People are coming around?" Ethan asked. "Slowly, not everyone, but enough." Marcus looked at Nalin, who was nursing the baby by the window. "You two did something most folks thought impossible, built a bridge where everyone said there was only a canyon." After Marcus left, Ethan stood on the porch, watching the sun set. Nalin joined him, their son sleeping peacefully in her arms. "You think he will have good life?" she asked. "Our Daniel?" "I think we'll give him the best life we can. Teach him both worlds. Let him choose his own path." He put his arm around her shoulders. "And we'll love him. That's what matters." Nayland leaned into him. "Yes, love is what matters, is what saves us, is what makes us human." The desert wind carried the scent of sage and possibility. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. Not lonely, just singing. The way they were singing now, together,